Okay, we are at 24 in. We're going to go ahead and start at 6:33. As mentioned earlier, tonight's session is recorded. We will send the link to that later, as well as the actual PowerPoint presentation. As you heard, or maybe didn't hear, you can take notes, but these notes will be sent to you. So tonight's session is recorded. And so will the Hawks basketball game. So please don't talk about it because I want to watch it afterwards. I have it recorded downstairs. I can't believe we made it this far. I'm an Iowa alum. Sorry, everybody, but that's where we're at. So welcome, Waldorf alumni and friends. My name is Rod Schultz. I'm Senior Director of Engagement and Advancement. Together with my colleague, Theo Schoenman, who's a 2020 and 2025 grad, we're glad that you can join us for this special lecture and discussion about The Anxious Generation, a book by Jonathan Haidt. The estimate is about an hour for the lecture and about a half hour for Q&A. Questions are going to be gathered via the chat at the bottom there and then answered in the order that they're received afterwards. If you're unable to stay through the Q&A, we'll do our best to send the answers. You'll also have the link to the recording of this, and you could just fast forward to that part. As always, please update your contact information with Waldorf via waldorf.edu website. It's under the Alumni and Friends tab. And for a save the date, we will try for another virtual seminar looking at maybe Thursday, May 28th. So stay tuned for that. Jan, I know you're on here. This is not yours. We'll talk about that one later. I didn't want to start you with that. So, Dr. Kris Myhrwold Meyer, class of 1975, who just celebrated her 50th reunion last fall, and it was fantastic. She is a counselor, educator, administrator, and a motivational storyteller. You'll understand that point. A proud Waldorf alumna and a member of the Waldorf University Board of Trustees. She is a recipient of the Waldorf Alumni Distinguished Service Award and was named a National Distinguished Principal. Her work and research focus on resiliency, mental health, and helping people thrive through adversity. So on that note, welcome, Dr. Kris Meyer.
Thank you, Rod, and thank you, Theo. I'm just really honored to be here as an alum with all the Waldorf family. So thanks for this opportunity. You know, as I was looking at this topic, I presented it several different times, and so I'm a storyteller, and I love connecting stories to concepts. And I don't have as many in this presentation as I normally do, but I hope that you get hooked on this content as much as I do. You know, what's interesting about this is I'm just going to jump in. It was let's see, 1924, or is it? I think it's 1924 publication, 1924. That's 2 years ago. And look at the changes in our technology and what we're facing with. Jonathan Haidt was hardly even mentioned. I don't even know if he even mentioned AI in this. I don't think he did. But AI is a whole other thing. And if you Google him on some podcasts, or he has a called, well, it's in my resources, that his publication that he writes on in his website. And he has a lot of things to say about that. He's started a social trend that's just taken off. So what tonight we're just I'm going to do a little intro and then we'll get into some of the essence of the book. Many of you probably have the book. Many of you probably have it and haven't read it, or some of you have read it, and that's why you're here, because you feel it's and that's why I'm here. I think it's a very important topic, and it sure has affected the world. Jonathan Haidt is one person, has done so much for that. So, you can go. I'm going to say next because I couldn't get my PowerPoint up here like this. So Rod is my navigator. So when I say next, you'll know he's going. This is just, I put the line, remember who you are. This is a little bit about me. My husband is Don Meyer. He used to be the director of alumni at Waldorf, and he was also the vice president of advancement. before he went to Wartburg. But so he was there in many, many, many years at Waldorf. Love, and he's also a grad of 1972. And our family, we have our son in the middle. He's the one that's going to go back from teaching Norwegian at St. Olaf to teaching Norwegian at the University of Washington. And you see our two most darling children, and our wonderful daughter-in-law. And then our daughter Maria is the oldest, and she lives with us here in Rochester, Minnesota. And her friend Matt, and they are the most musical and delightful people. I'm a journaler and I'm a podcaster. I will mention that in just a wee bit. But building bridges is what my main emphasis in living, I think, is just to build bridges between people. And everything I do should be like a playground. Enjoy life. So let's go to the next one. I want you to know what brought us here. For me, the article, do you see the woman in the middle, Dr. Jean Twenge? I read her article in 2018. I was a principal of St. Paul's Lutheran School in Waverly, Iowa, and was doing a parenting workshop. And I read her article in the Atlantic called "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" And it just woke me up. And I shared that within this parent workshop that I was given. And then, not long after that, Grandpa came to our school one day to pick up his grandchildren, came 30 minutes too early. And he sat by the chair we have by the secretary's desk, and he sat there. And I said, "Can I get you water? Can I get you something to read?" No, no, no. He sat there for 30 minutes, just sat there, just looking around. And I thought, whoa, can we do that anymore? Not hardly. And that's the effect of what we're talking about tonight. And then the seed was planted by my son, Andrew, because he'd heard a podcast by Jonathan Haidt on his anxious generation. He told me about it. I bought the book and everything changed. And then when you're aware of something, you see things so differently. Not long after that, I was in a restaurant here in Rochester, and I saw this family of four, darling little family, every single one. Well, the minute they sat down, they all had a device, no conversation. That's where we've become. Oops, not yet. And then the other one was, go back right. Oh, yeah. And then we were in a male waiting room, and this little boy was running around, and the mother said, "Here, take my phone." So he would be quiet instantly. Quiet as long as they needed him. And then a little girl, 10 years old, she was talking to me about her friends and stuff, and she goes, "Oh, and then my anxiety really kicked in." Anxiety has become part of our vernacular because it just seems like we built it into all of us in some ways. And we can learn to do better than that. And we'll start with social media. So let's go to the next one. So the next slide says, oh, there it is. There's the anxious generation. And I love Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, "A mind once expanded by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." And that's how I hope you'll leave tonight. Next. So I have to give you a little caveat. I've changed a little bit of perspective this last week. My sister Frida, who is in that picture of my other sister Deb, Frida is a 78 grad from Waldorf, and many of you knew her, and she was just a fantastic friend and singer and kindness. She was our mom's full-time caregiver, and she died very suddenly a week and a half ago in Ireland on a trip with her friend Beth, and it's been devastating. But I talked about it in my podcast. I have a little podcast Mondays for 5 or 6 minutes. And I called this last Monday Gift Beyond Measure because although, and I mentioned that, social media and that I've been studying has done some not good things to our society and especially our children. But as an adult, this week really proved that if it is used right, it can be a tool for good. And it helped us get the message out about Frida, and it helped us get the support and love from so many people that helped us go on and deal with this at a time as this, and helped us share her music so they could see how she affected the world. So I think that is kind of a good thing to realize, that as an adult, we can use something that is not good, but we can change it to positive and model it that way. Thanks. So I just had to share that. You can go to the next one. So we're not going to break into groups or anything, but as you think about, as we begin, just think about for you, do you remember what your play was like with childhood? Did you have a neighborhood where you gathered with kids? Who did you play with? What did you do? And what do you remember about it? I think that's such a thing to ponder. I can see my backyard, and I can see taking my bike down the street and coming back home. So many people said, well, we just came back when the whistle blew. Or on the farm, it was a whole different thing. And so then compare that to what you see as children's childhood play today. Your grandchildren, your own children, your friends' children. What does it look like? Let's go to the next. So this book is into 4 parts. The first part looks at the mental health trends amongst our adolescents, and it starts in 2010, and that's where they see the research is really honed in on. That's where the anxiousness, that's where, because of the introduction of smartphones several years earlier, that's where we have this whole world in the palm of our hand that started us looking at things differently. Part 2 is nature of childhood and how we messed up, how we went from a play-based to a phone-based. And part 3 talks about the harms that resulted from that phone-based childhood. But then part 4, we can present a problem, but if we can't help look at a solution, where are we going to go? And so he talks about how we can reverse the damage through families, through schools, and through societies. Let's go on to the next. This is Jerry Panis was a fundraising guru, and I love this quote, and I try to work it in any way I can. You just have to twist it a little bit. But he said, our job as leaders, and maybe it could be our job as parents, our job as educators, our job as people in society, is not to lead the horse to water nor to make it drink. Our job is to make the horse thirsty. So when you look at Gen Z, which is the generation that has been most affected by social media, and that kind of use in the computer, if you look at them, we need to make them hungry to see what changes can be made. Okay, let's go to the next. So the part 1 of this is about the tidal wave, he calls it, and Jonathan Haidt introduces the book about, would you let a group of people come to your child without your permission or anything, and just say, do you want to go on a trip? And you're going to get everything paid for, you're going to be introduced to all sorts of things. And then they just say, yeah, we'll go, without consulting you, and maybe take them to Mars. And you don't know where they're going to be. You don't know what they're going to be doing. You don't know what they're exposed to. You don't know if they'll come back the same. And that's how he kind of compares it to social media, and how they have kind of taken over sometimes the minds and the hearts of kids, and we don't even know where they really are. So the early tech leaders were hailed as geniuses, and of our heroes like Zuckerman and all those that started Facebook, and then changed it to Meta. The tech companies, they didn't know child development. They only knew competition and profit. And so that's what they based all of this stuff on. And so when they were accused of it, they denied. And there was just yesterday, the lawsuit was completed that I think it was, I didn't read it closely who the originators were. I think a woman whose child committed suicide because of social media, and I'm not sure but the premise of the lawsuit was that they used that device for addiction purposes, and they denied it, but they lost the lawsuit. They will probably appeal, but it'll have an effect. Tech companies have they don't know you, and they don't often care, because the money is the big leader in that. Jonathan Haidt said no company could ever take our children away and endanger them without our consent, or they would face massive liabilities, right? No, but it's happening. And AI is the next thing that we're going to have to deal with, because it gives so many children and young adults directions on what they want and what they could do if they are not happy. I'm a mental health counselor at the University of Minnesota, so I work with students all the time now. And one of the things I worry about is a lot of students are getting, in young adults are getting their counseling through an AI, which has algorithms that will feed and change and morph into what they hear from the person. And then they are getting information that eventually might not be very healthy for them. So that's a whole other thing. And eating disorders are exacerbated by what they hear and what they see. And so the dangers are real. They're also devices, they have become handy babysitters. And our parents, people, children get their phones so early. And then they see things that they're not ready to see. And that danger goes on. And then the damage to girls is the biggest through social media. And boys, it's video gaming. And video gaming is fine because there's a lot of group interaction, and that Jonathan Haidt talks about that. But when it gets deep and dark and hooks them into porn and other worlds that they can almost hardly get out of, that's when it gets so dangerous and so bad for them. I think, I'm just going to take a peek at what I want. One of the things we have such a hard time is people is to balance, to know the good and the bad, to know how much or how little, to know how to stop doing what everybody else is doing. In the early 2000s, the co-creators, the products of the internet came out, and it made life easy. It made fun. It made production of things easier, helped people connect. It helped us communicate. And that's when we made those founders our heroes. But things transformed, then they began to transform children into adults much sooner than they were able. Television was already here, but now we had this technology in the palm of our hand or in our pockets. And it was personalized and it was portable. We could go anywhere, and it engaged us all the time. We could never be bored, the word I hate, because we always had that thing to scroll. Lenore Skenazy has done program with Jonathan Haidt on helping parents come up with things for their children to do, programs that make them strong and confident. And I think it's called, I have it in my resources. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I will mention it later. But Lenore Skenazy has a TED Talk called Free Range. And she talks about the kids that are given that freedom to explore and do independent play, unsupervised play. And it's a very, very interesting thing. Okay, let's go to the next. So we knew that in the 1980s, we know carefully, and some of there's a lot of different reasons why it happened, but parents became fearful, and that's when you started hearing the helicopter parenting, the snowplow parenting, the lawnmower parenting, so that our kids wouldn't have to suffer. We wouldn't have to be scared that they would be around dangers, because we're going to keep them close to us. We're going to supervise them all the time. And little did they know that by giving them these devices to keep them inside, it kept them from growing into the adults that they needed to know how to become. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because the skills that we learned outside, where it was kind of dangerous in our minds, inside where it would be safe is now much, much more dangerous. So I think that is an important thing to keep in mind. So the story began in the 1980s, fearful and overprotective. Children, they have the internet adults age set at 13, and it was kind of a random age because it was that movies. Remember, we had the movies that are child related or something, and at 13 you could go to the movies, certain kind of movies. Well, that's why they picked the age 13, which is way too early to let children go anywhere they want to in social media. But they didn't make it a law. It's a law, that they had at that age, but they didn't make it so that it was verifiable. They just have to check the box and then they're in. Now 40% of American children under 13 have Instagram accounts. And you can imagine some of the things that they see and experience. I remember as a school counselor, I'm working with a little boy who was given access to some really awful movies. And I didn't know who the perpetrator was, if it was a real person or if it was a movie. And we're kind of that way now. The generation is Gen Z, they call it, is a person born kind of around 1995, 1996. The millennials are the ones before them. But the oldest Gen Z those oldest Gen Z people began puberty about 2009. The iPhone came into being 2007. And that's when social media became viralized. Likes and retweet tweets came in 2009, and that sense of comparison and validity or value in our world, that is about that time. So those likes and tweets became addictive. Posting images of ourselves came when the front-facing camera could take selfies, and then the sense of narcissism, in a sense, I mean, in ourselves, began to focus. So those things were extra dangers. And then Facebook acquired Instagram in 2012. Cynthia Moore, or Optal Moore, is on here tonight. She gave me an awfully interesting video the other night. His name is Jared Horvath. He's a neuroscientist, I think, and was I think he was not defending, but presenting to a congressional committee. It was just very, very recently, and he's talking about the tools that have decreased our cognitive ability. Our Gen Z people are less cognitive capable than our generation was, their parents' generation. Every generation before, the children have become more cognitively capable, except this one. It's decreased in its cognitive capacity. And the other thing that we want to talk about a little bit is and he talks about the use of computers in schools. You know, I remember when the first Texas Instruments brought in computers into school. Oh my land. I remember I was in Forest City at that time in the schools, and we got, I think, from Winnebago. The schools got some computers, and we thought that was fantastic. And it was, we didn't know any different. And now, after being a principal in a little elementary school, where eventually all the kids have iPads, if I was a principal again, I would want to take every single one of them out there. I just think that the learning, our test scores have gone down and down and down. And so there's some things we have to really look at. In the book Upstream, and that's by Dan Heath, he introduces in this book the story of these two guys that are out by this lake, and they see somebody out in the lake that is drowning. So they jump in and they go save the person. And all of a sudden they pull them out on shore. And then there's another one out there. So they go and save that one and they pull them out shore. And another, all of a sudden, it seems like everywhere they look, there's somebody that needs their help to save their life. They're drowning. And so one guy gets out and starts walking away. And the guy that he was with, he's trying to save all these people. Say, where are you going? Why are you leaving? Aren't you going to help me save these people? No, he goes, I'm going upstream to see who threw him in. That's where we need to go. We know where we are. We have to go back and say, what can we do to fix this so it doesn't get worse and continue to permeate our world and our society. Let me see. Where am I? I have to keep checking things. Let's go to the next one, Rod. Okay, so that's the upstream. Overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world. That's a big premise of Jonathan Haidt's work. And this is where I'll probably just read to you. 2010 to 2015, social lives of American teens moved from smartphones with constant connection to social media and online video games and other internet-based activities. They moved to those. Haidt claims it's the single largest reason for the increase in adolescent mental illness beginning in 2010s. Youth became more anxious, depressed, self-harming, and suicidal. Today at my work, I just heard somebody say that one of the people that deals with young college students, and I can't remember in what capacity, said all of a sudden she sees them as they just don't seem to have as much mental health issues. But that made me kind of curious. Is AI replacing some of that? We don't know. But that's just a isolated incident. We see so much more mental health issues right now. Suicidal and self-harming is increased significantly since 2010. Gen Z goes through puberty with phones in their pocket, calling them away from people to alternate universe is exciting, addictive, and unsuitable things for children and adolescents. That's the bottom line. Let's go to the next one, Rod. I like this quote by Jonathan Haidt. He said, in March, we teamed up with a Harris poll to hear directly from kids. Among more than 500 children aged 8 through 12, nearly 3/4 agreed. I would spend less time online if there were more friends in my neighborhood to play with in person. How they'd prefer to spend their time in person, free play, was the clear winner. This little screenshot is of a teenager who went phone-free for camp for 7 weeks and wrote to her mom, just saying, you are so right about the phone anxiety, LOL. Nothing specific happened, but just being away on my phone makes me have a bad feeling in my body. So you could say, I told you so. So grateful for camp that I don't have to feel that way all summer. Powerful, isn't it? There was another quote that he has in the book about this boy that said, he wishes he would have spent less time on his phone and more time talking to his grandparents when they'd been around. Now he didn't have the chance. Let's go to the next one, Rod. So there's 3 tragedies that Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book. And the rewiring isn't just the technology that changed the children's days and their minds. The other things, even though they were well-intentioned, they weren't so good. They shifted to overlook protecting and then restricting the autonomy or that natural independence of children. So those 3 tragedies that unfortunately we used to have in place to prepare us for adult life are these. Number 1, the loss of trust in our neighbors. In the 70s, I thought this was so interesting. Air conditioning, TV, smaller families, staying inside, and not socializing with our neighbors happened. AC, air conditioning, that was something that kept us inside. And it makes sense when you look at it now, doesn't it? The second one was the loss of play-based childhood began in the 80s. Free play declined. Parents became fearful that kidnappers and sexual predators were going to come and do something with their children. That was in the 80s. The third one was the great rewiring that began 2010 to 2015 and produced the phone-based childhood. So that the paradox is that parents work to eliminate risk and freedom in the real world. Unknowingly, they granted full independence in the virtual world. So those are those 2 trends that makes us the anxious generation. So let's go to the next one, Rod. The great transition of the late 1880s, we just kind of talked about in the last one, went from that play-based childhood to the screen-based childhood. It took that risk away. And I thought it was interesting. In the research that they did, they found that there were an average of only 100, there was of the average of true kidnappings, that weren't family-based. Most of the kidnappings are from a custodial or non-custodial parent, or some kind of relative kind of thing like that. But 150 true-based in the United States a year. But because of those 150, we lock up our kids and keep them safe, and the deaths by suicide spike. That's a paradox. So this is where we have come to have the anxious generation. Let's go to the next one, Rod. Concerns. I love some of these concepts, and I'm just going to read it to you. The sensitive and crucial years of puberty, this is so important, are when most adolescents get their own phones and move their social lives online. Just think that vulnerable time in development is when they get social media and they see what everybody else is that they don't feel like they are. Think about those things that kind of affected you. Maybe somebody said something, maybe you saw something when you were that age, and it had such an effect on your your life. Fifth grade, I remember Jay Gunderson. He said I was fat. Boy, that's a vision I have of myself to this very day. Just imagine when you magnify that by what kids see in their social media in that vulnerable time. Social media platforms engineered for engagement, but hijack social learning and limit family. I'm going to see if I can get this out of there. Yep. And limit family and community interaction while locking eyes on influencers instead of real people. Just think of that. I just think it's so well said. I think we can go to the next one, but I have a story that I wanted to tell you. Oh, here we go. This is a new book that's out. This is the Amazing Generation that I have out there. This is for kids, and it's easy, very easy to read, and it's got cartoon based things so that it repeats and introduces kids to the basic premise. It has a story about a kiddo that's cool, not having to hang on to a phone all the time, with the other ones that are so fed by what other people think. So this is a very good for kids and adults too. I think that's, and then Jean Twenge that I mentioned, she wrote the 10 rules for raising kids in high-tech world. It's a good parenting book. And then this one, I have to tell you the story about this one, Because I Love You. This is by Max Lucado. And I had a girl when I was a school counselor in Forest City bring this to me and said, Mrs. Meyer, can you read this to the class for our guidance classes? And I said, sure. Well, I put it on my little tray on my corner of my desk, and it got buried. And one day I was cleaning it off, and I found it, and I read it, and I thought, oh my. And I used that book to teach pornography to maybe fourth and fifth graders for the rest of the year. It's about a little boy that came to it was this village that loved this carpenter whose name was Shaddai, and all the children loved him. Well, one day, Shaddai built a stone wall around the village, and the little boy named Paladin came to him one day and said, Shaddai, I found a hole in the wall. And Shaddai said, yeah, I know. I want you to stay here because you want to, not because you have to. Well, Paladin was curious. He ran right away to that hole in the wall when he left Shaddai, crawled through it, and found outside, it was just as beautiful as, he thought it was beautiful and nice. What did Shaddai do that? He thought for the first time, Shaddai didn't know what he was talking about. And then he decided to go tell his friends. He went toward the hole, but it was gone. And all of a sudden he heard dark crackling branches and shadows, and he got scared, and it was lonely and afraid, and he sat down and cried. And Shaddai had already left to come and rescue him. But I used it to tell kids, sometimes you will see things on the internet and movies and in stuff that you see on your phones that you aren't ready for. Your bodies aren't ready for. They make you feel things you aren't ready for. But it's like going through that hall. You can't go back sometimes. Once you feel it, you'll be different. And so I help them come up with their age group sayings that they could say to somebody who wanted them to come and look at this so that they could be cool and yet refuse. So that's why I had that one. You can go to the next one, Rod. So 4 reforms to reverse the damage to rewiring. And this is I think they are so logical, and there's more out there too, but no smartphones before high school or the age 14. Only basic phones. He said, get a basic phone, anything that's not connected to the internet. Our grandson there's a thing called tin can phones. He can only call the people on that little phone. And he calls his cousins. And I said, for my birthday, I wanted an account with his phone, because if they move to Washington, I want to be able to call my grandchildren. And so I got an account to his phone because I can just call him. He actually called while we were talking tonight, and I didn't answer, of course. Can you tell? But just a basic phone, that's okay, but not anything to the internet. Then no social media before age 16. And later on, you'll find that he said families that band together with these same rules are most effective in reversing the damage, because then their children can't say, I'm the only one. No, if they have families that agree upon the same practices, it'll help the kids be so strong, and they'll feel so good about those decisions that their parents have made. They might not voice it, but I think they'll feel good. So no social media before 16. And if you've been listening to the news, you'll know that Australia, New Zealand, UK, Indonesia is doing big things right now. All sorts of countries all over the world are making a big stand against social media too young in children and young adults. So this trend is moving fast and wonderfully. We're ending up to be a little behind. Phone-free schools. There's a lot of schools, and there's this slide that I'll show you that some states have them totally banned, some have partially, and all that. The most effective is just totally ban those phones in school. Put them in a locked bag. That office can, they've already been invented, and they can get them at the end. And the communication that schools are finding is just amazing. Kids have fun. They're starting to play games together. It makes a whole difference on those kiddos. And then more unsupervised play and childhood independence. That's a hard one because we become so tied to keeping our kids safe. And that's an interesting thing. These are not hard if families do it. They don't cost a thing. Buckminster Fuller developed he was an engineer, and he developed the geodesic dome. And he said, when I die on my tombstone, I want you to write this: call me trim tab. And he went on to explain that trim tabs are these little teeny rudders, these teeny rudders that line the large rudder of an ocean liner. When the ocean liner is ready to turn, those little rudders, they start moving first, creating a low pressure that allows the big rudder to turn easily, and the ship will turn without effort. If it didn't have those little rudders making the low pressure, that big rudder, when the ship tried to turn, the rudder would snap off because of the pressure of the water. It's those little decisions in life that make such a big difference. And so the little things that we can start to do, our awareness, our conversations with people in our social world and beyond, and our letter writing to the schools to make a different changes in their policies, all those little rudders can help that big rudder move and change in our communities, even without legislation. And we can go to the next one, Rod. And this is just, I'm going to go to the next one because I might run out of time. This is just another little story. But if you remind me if you wanted me to go back to it. So there's some wonderful benefits to the play that comes from free play. And that's such a big thing in this whole experience for our kiddos. Social development. I know Renee Lenning is on here. She's a guru on development. But that social development, we learn by attunement, by when we play together. We learn to sync our actions with others by watching them and learning to copy things that eventually we will become our own selves at. But it all starts with watching others and trying on things and attuning timing of facial expressions and reactions to things. That development is so important. Skills of conflict resolution happens in play. Learning to connect, learning to take turns, learning to learn harmony, learn to navigate culture and develop identities. I just forgot what I was going to say. It was something interesting, but I'll go on to the next thing. But anyway, stress wood is this wood that is developed within tree. Oh, not yet. We can go back to the old one. Yeah, he just got so excited his finger moved. Anyway, the stress wood is that wood that develops in trees when they're young growing and the winds blow and they push them over and they blow them back and forth, and the stress wood builds inside, so that as they get older and older, the winds and the storms can come, but they will not destroy the tree. That's what these things are like. They build stress wood in children. One of the things, I remembered what I was going to say, one of the big things that we have done to children when there was some things in the 80s that the schools felt the importance of academics and test results were so important that they took away recess time so that they could spend more time on teaching to the tests that would give them, you've read the news those years, and we've really flipped the important things in our growing time for our children in schools. They need recess. They need recess a lot. They need free play. They learn so much better when they have those things. They're essential to developmental skills. You can go to the Nixon Rod. I could go on and on about that. So children learn to connect. They learn to take turns. They learn to synchronize through play. They learn so many things that are lifelong skills. So Jonathan Haidt talks about two subsystems that we have in ourselves. The discover mode, which you get from play outside. You're learning about things. You see the bugs. You want to figure it out. You want to try these. You get mad at somebody. You have to figure out what you're going to do to get, play together nicely. They approach through opportunities. They approach the opportunities as positive. By the plugging ourselves into the computer, the phone all the time, we find that kids and people themselves, adults as well, become in the defend mode. They're always defending against threats. There's so much negativity. There's so much comparison. There's so many things that bring about angst in ourselves. And so it makes us anxious, and it makes us in that constant defend mode. I thought that was pretty interesting. So you can go on to the next one, Rod. One of the things that Jonathan Haidt says is that the benefits of free play is that risky play develops anti-phobic effects because you build confidence, by taking some risks and having a chance to fail and get hurt and overcome it. And they find that then they aren't so fragile. We've really nurtured a lot of fragility in kiddos by our overprotection and interfering, and we see them now as fragile. Our children shouldn't have to experience that. Have you heard that? Oh, they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to. But, maybe they should, because it makes them stronger and ready to meet the world. Antiphobic. Isn't that interesting? Or that little girl that said, oh, my anxiety really checked in. We didn't ever say that before. We didn't need to. We didn't experience it. Okay, you can go to the next one, Rod. Safetyism is another term that Jonathan Haidt uses in his work. We don't, and it goes back to that same concept, and I'll read this for you. Safetyism doesn't allow for risk-taking. Thus, it blocks kids from overcoming anxiety, learning to manage risk, and learning to self-govern. And smartphones are at the second experience blocker. You look at that cartoon, it just cracks me up, but it's kind of, isn't that kind of true? So that concept of safetyism, now that you've heard these things, I hope that you leave with an awareness and you start listening for things differently and watching for things differently. We see it in our television shows. We see it everywhere. We hear that, oh, be careful. I mean, the words be careful, I think, are one of our new new words that are the most popular. But smartphones, they push out or reduce other non-phone-based things that our brain needs. So I think that's the good things to keep in mind. Let's go to the next one, Rod. So the great rewiring of childhood, he talks about 4 basic harms. One is social deprivation. We don't have the face-to-face time with friends, and that's really plummeted. One of the things as a college counselor that I deal with a lot is loneliness, because they don't know how to make friends. They don't know how to. I had to work with a student that she had a table partner she liked in this one class, and we talked a lot about how she could do it. So I said, on Friday, just say to her, what are you going to do this weekend? So the next time she came in to meet with me, I asked her how did it go. And she said, when she asked that, the girl said, well, we're going to a movie with friends tonight. Do you want to go? Look at that. But she didn't know how to reach out to make friends. We don't have that chance with our kiddos today. Enough said. You know, you can fill in the blanks. Another one is sleep deprivation. Wow. You know, kids will watch all night long their scroll, and they'll let AI write their papers the next day. That's happening a lot. And it's so sad. Sleep deprivation, quantity and quality, leads to the depression that we've seen, anxious anxiety we've seen, irritability, the cognitive effects that we've seen lower, poor learning styles, lower grades, increase in accidents because driving, not watching where you're going, more deaths from accidents. There was a boy that was in the papers several years ago that was, got a big word, 14-year-old in the bus. The bus driver had a heart attack and he saw it happen. He went up and he put his foot on the brake and pulled the bus to safety. Nobody else saw it happen. You know why? Because he was the only kid on the bus whose folks didn't give him a phone. Isn't that something? So there goes to the next one, attention fragmentation. We've lost the ability to stay on task because we used to blame it on Sesame Street because you know how they change frames so fast. Well, look at our phones, scroll, and we're skimming. We don't know how to look for comprehension of details because we're so used to skimming. I'm sounding like a negative person, but you know, this is very interesting stuff. We just have to bring it in, and then we will go for the good stuff. And then addiction. That was what that lawsuit was about. So I encourage you to look that up and see what you can learn about that lawsuit, because it was a big win for parents that rose up against the tech companies that put those things in. Television doesn't have the same thing as the phones do. It doesn't have those same algorithms that are built in to keep wanting you more. And it's based a lot on dopamine. Dopamine is released by scrolling and seeing those things, and it's pleasurable, but it doesn't trigger feelings of satisfaction. You instead need more. You want more of the thing that release that dopamine, and gradually you'll need more and more to get the same effect. And we see this in kids that will withdraw, boys especially. They'll get hooked on the dopamine, and they'll get hooked on in pornography. They'll get hooked on it so they get the same feelings, and they need more and more. And they find that in real persons, it's not the same. So they are not connecting. They're staying in their rooms with pornography as their partner. So that's the real danger of that addiction. I think we can go to the next one, Rod. I hope I didn't miss anything. This one I'm going to read because there's a difference between boys and girls, and Jonathan Haidt is very careful not to say that the equity between the sexes and the genders, but he said we need to know that sometimes there's some innate things that are different. So, and I'm using the gender titles just as is here, but open in the world, so you know. But girls have a desire to connect and belong. That's their agency, to belong. Girls prefer TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, all those things, Snapchat. They're more sensitive to visual comparisons. Aggression is expressed by trying to harm other relationships and reputations, and you can almost hear that. Girls and women readily share emotions online, how they feel about things. Often they're hyper connected to others with anxiety, depression, and are vulnerable to sociogenic illnesses. So, you know, they say the witch hunts during the Salem trials, it was kind of like a sociogenic thing, really, that they had all these, everybody had the same symptoms of something, you know, and that's what happens sometimes they become so hyper connected on social media that they share the same kind of things, like anxiety, like depression, like all sorts of things. And the internet, it makes it easy for men to approach, stalk women, behave badly, and then escape accountability. And there's so much sharing of nude photos that never leave the air. Okay, the next one, Rod. So that's basically there for the girls. What's happening to the boys? They prefer gaming to social media. And as I said before, gaming can be a very social game, and they talk to each other and have a good time. But their agency and aggression is expressed physically. Achievement in education and schoolwork, in school, work, and family life declined since the 1970s. Boys they withdrew time and effort from physical world, the world, invested in expanding virtual worlds, especially heavy into gaming. And the greater risks than girls was not to go to college, not to get employed or be trained in something. And boys began to shun risks. And so they just really flipped that natural agency that they had before, that had been ingrained in our society for a long time. Smartphones provided unlimited free hardcore pornography, accessible anytime, anywhere. Remember when they used to talk about the magazines that were behind the counter? And now it's anywhere. Heavy users became addicted and they became lonely. Okay, the next one, Rod. So what can we do? An answer lies in together. I think I have to see where I am looking. I'm looking at some notes just to make sure I don't forget some things, but I will. I absolutely forget some things. But I just love that he gave us some place to look and to hook onto possibilities. It's not too late to do something. Alone looks helpless. Together, the barriers go down. Together, the barriers go down. I just love that. Collective action, problems or social dilemmas, together. That's together. I want to put a little caveat in here right now. There is a chapter that I did not include in this PowerPoint. It's that one it's chapter 8, and it's called Spiritual Degradation and Degradation. And sorry, I said it wrong. And elevation. So he has a lot. He said, Jonathan, he said, I'm an atheist. But when I did this chapter, I started looking at things a bit differently. And he saw in religion a ritual. The rituals are such an important part of life. I remember Al Dungan was a good friend of ours. He was a pastor and a Bible camp counselor in Wisconsin when I was growing up. And when I got to know him later on, he worked with addicted people in Minneapolis. And he said that those that can recover from addictions easiest are those that have ritual and traditions in their background. I thought that was interesting, hooks. And so the rituals are very important. And Jonathan Haidt in his chapter 8 talks about how ritual and religions often have movement. They bodily movement in sync with each other, and there's a significance to it. They practice stillness, silence, and meditation to calm, to open our hearts, to be enlightened, to connect with God. They define that sense of self-transcendence. And so it's that getting to know who you are amongst a spiritual world of people. Most religions, he said, urge people to be less judgmental, which look at the things we deal with on social media, so much judgment. They work to be slow to anger and quicker to forgive. Social media encourages the opposite. And the grandeur of nature, the awe of creation that's found in spirituality, that is so important to focus on in our families. And then in every human heart, I think is so important. In every human heart, he states in this chapter, is yearning for meaning, connection, and spiritual elevation. Phone-based fills holes with trivial, degrading content. Wow. So the collective action, kids just want to fit in. They feel that they need a phone or Instagram. Everyone has one. If I don't get one, I'll be excluded. Parents don't want that, so they always give in. Not always, I shouldn't have said that word. The same problems for parents hoping to grow independent kids. Easy when all the kids are playing outside, but in a neighborhood when nobody is outside, it's hard to be the first one to let your kid will go outside. In the book and in his podcast, Jonathan Haidt talks about how, he lives in New York City and they helped their 10-year-old boy. No routes, so they had let him go. I don't know how many miles it was on the subway system back home. Whoa, it scares us because we have been so ingrained with safetyism. Let's go to the next one, Rod. So collective action program requires 4 types of collective responses. 1, voluntary coordination. They have that was with this what is her name? Lenore Skenazy. They started this thing, wait till 8th grade. So you have a group of parents, wait till 8th grade. They call it that. And that's the example of no smartphone to their 8th grade. Get 10 families together, sign a pledge. Elementary age children, then they will not have a smartphone until 8th grade. And of course, it could be older. Some countries are making it older, and they are not the only ones. Well, let's go to the next one, Rod. The second one is social norms and moralization. Community sees a personal decision in moral terms. For example, there was a woman who was arrested because she let her 9-year-old daughter walk around the block alone or something like that. And it became a big legal issue and filled the papers for a while. But that's what we've made our social norms for. And that Lenore Skenazy talks about that free range. We need to let them be able to go beyond our fingertips. Okay, let's go to the next one, Rod. It's technological solutions. You know, we can go to the moon. We can certainly figure out how to make sure that somebody is not an adult when they say they are on getting some of the apps that they get onto. One of the things I got to put this in real quick about that video that I said that Cynthia Abdal Moore sent me about Dr. Horvat. He said that the technology, or maybe this was in the news, the tech company said, nobody can get addicted with just one app. Well, somebody can get addicted with one kind of liquor. And so I think that was pretty weak. Okay, let's see. So new products and inventions. There we go. That's our hope. Okay, you can go to the next one. Laws and rules. They require social media companies to verify ages, and then the institutions setting policies in the schools. And I presented this in Rochester at the community college, and so that's why I have Rochester cell phone thing on there. But those are 4 types of things that he feels that we can do for collective responses. All right, let's go to the next one, Rod. This is a recent map, 25-26, of schools that have cell phone bans. So the orangish one is a total ban. You can't have a phone in school. They call it bell to bell, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. The gold one is partial, and then the green is no outright ban. So in Minnesota, where I live, they leave it up to the schools to make the policy. And so that's where it is, and it's changing quickly. So hopefully it'll change more and more as we go along. Okay, let's go up to the next one, Rod. Others I think is so interesting are schools and computers, and we talked about that, how now it's become the more, and they spend 5 hours sometimes on computers. And when my little grandson, our daughter brings her iPad, and she has this one color thing that he loves to do. But boy, he's 5 years old, and his behavior changes when they make him get off. That it just makes people irritable, kids irritable. And so look at the things that are happening in schools. We don't need to have those computers. I'm sounding like an old fogey, but it's true. This is not being an old fogey. This is being research-based stuff. And then there was just a wonderful article that Jonathan Haidt, and I think I have in the resources, I have a link to where you can find his stuff. But anyway, they just did a big change in their social media and what their expectations are. It's a beautiful article. So things are progressing around the world. You can go to the next one, Rod. He does have caveats, which I think is important that he said that. He said, make the changes that are right for you and your community. It's not a blanket, and trust your children, trust yourself, and learn to trust your children. When they say I'm the only one, give it to me, that's different. But can they do the things outside? Can they make some of these changes? So make changes that are right for your community. Number 2, he admits that maybe he's wrong on some points. And as we know, it's a 2-year publication. So things have changed quickly in those 2 years, especially regarding chat boxes and AI. And number three, he acknowledges that it is hard to be a parent and to be a teacher and to be a school administrator, be a coach, or anyone that works with children. It is hard to do those things. But together we can get more free play. We can get more recess. We can get changes in our schools and our governments. And those are the important things. So there's things that the government can do by law. We can go to the next one, Rob. We're going to quick slide through these pretty quick. With the schools, the policy changes. Let Grow Play Club. That's the one that he formed this organization with Lenore Skenazy. What can we do to empower kids after school? And so these are Let Grow Play Club, where they go outside after school at K through 8, play on the playground without supervision of a playground teacher. Liability stuff that you're always you got to deal with their insurance companies and schools, but work it through. Be more playful by more recess, more natural playgrounds, and fewer rules. And then homework assignments. He said, encourages parents to ask their children, what would you like to do that you've never done before on your own? And maybe they'll say, I want to go down to so, and then you make a plan, reach an agreement, and let it happen. I have to tell you this, and this is funny for you because you can't see the picture. I went to my daughter-in-law's and presented a little bit because their preschool parents were doing this book in a book club discussion. And she had this picture. She sent Arva, our grandson, who's 5, from their house, 3 houses down, with some food because they were collecting food to give to immigrant families that weren't leaving their homes. And so he had this little satchel of food that he was supposed to bring down to the neighbor who was collecting them. So, he got all of it. Yep, I'll be right here. Don't worry. Just go down, leave it at the door or in their porch and just come. And so the mom sent a picture to my daughter-in-law, and Arva made his way down, and he just threw the food down on the steps right before he got right to the steps, and he ran home as fast as he could. But he did it. He did it. So those are the things that I think we can work together and do more of. But I love that. Do that little hard thing that they've never done before and plan it together. Okay, let's do the next one, Rod. And so what can they do now? Give children more unsupervised play to grow independent and responsible. And delay their full entry into the phone-based childhood by giving only basic phones until they're freshmen in high school, and have other parents join with you. Look for places to increase their engagement, like that phone-free camp. Connect with other parents. Do things without the phones around and devices. Spend time with other families, and nobody is looking at their phones. Those are things that can become social norms. How about the next one? And then little or no screen time for the first 18 to 24 months of their life. There's a thing, if you want to look, Dr. Ed Tornick, I think, did the still-faced experiments where he had a mother play with her little 18-month-old, or less than 18 months old, maybe a year old, gaga, goo goo, all those things. The baby's laughing and they're imitating, and then she turns and comes back like this. And whatever the baby did, she wouldn't move her face, and the baby tried harder and harder. He's tried the things that they did before, and pretty soon he just wailed and cried. Well, I have a 1-year-old grandson, Ralph, and this was several months ago, and he was in his walker right in front of my feet. We were playing with the toys on his tray, and I had to text somebody. I had the phone in my lap. I looked down on my lap below his tray, and I started to text, and immediately he started to cry. And I thought, whoa. Well, the next week, I just tried it to see if it was the same thing. And it was the same thing. That's a traumatic, that's an attachment thing. Where are you? And so many times they talk about nursing moms that nurse their babies and scroll. And that's not always a healthy thing, even though because the baby's eye contact is so important. That eye contact says, I know you, I bond with you. And so that time, no screen time for the parents and the children. It's important to look at the parent and not get caught in the scrolling. As a child grows, let them find a part-time job, go on an exchange program, summer wilderness, gap year. Free-range childhood grows confident, competent young adults with lower anxiety and fear. My sister Frida that died a week and a half ago. She went over to Ireland to see her her goddaughter, who was an exchange student, 17 years old. She was with Allison, her goddaughter, and her friend Beth when she died suddenly. Allison, so shy. She had to be part of this whole tragedy. Beth started compressions on Frida, and Allison was sent out into this little village. She didn't know anybody. She went stocking foot, rapped on all these doors. Finally, she saw a pub with lights on and knocked on that and went inside, and they came with an AED and all these people, and they made a community, and those people took care of Beth and Allison while the paramedics tried to save Frida. And they stayed with them till about 5 a.m. So that little Allison, 17 years old, experienced something traumatic, yes. But she can learn that she could do hard things. She didn't have to be protected from hard things because she can overcome with the help of a supporting community. So I think that's important to remember that it's okay. It's okay to expose them to sometimes there's suffering in the world, but there's also overcoming it when you have supportive people around you. So the biggest obstacle is a parent's own anxiety about letting their children out of their sight. So trust. Okay, let's go to the next one. Elementary, these are some of the things we've already talked about. Third places are places that people gather. There used to be like the town store with a little pickle barrel where people can, gather. Sometimes it's a coffee shop, but third places, or where's a family place? One of the things I think is so important that children have somebody outside their parents that they can turn to, another adult. And that Rosie Himberger was our kids'. And so everybody needs that for their child. And sometimes that's kind of like a third place that they can gather. It used to be the malls for kids. Now it's not even the malls. So where's that place for kids to gather and just be independent? All right, next one. Let's go, Rod. And there's resource. Oh, Rod, look at I got to the end and I have a little time left. Here's a lot of the resources. I think I must have missed it. Keep going, Rod. I think there might be another slide beyond it. Nope, I don't think. My research was in resiliency. So these are some of the external resiliency tools. But I love the Zulu. I guess it was on a movie once, but the Zulu language has this greeting, says Sawubona. Sawubona. And it means we see you. So when you say hi, it's I see you. Relationships are everything. So I think that's one more slide, I think, has a wonderful quote. Yeah, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step in your life. You maybe did that tonight. So thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for your love and thoughts, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.